All right, we'll just get started now. Hey everyone, welcome to our second to the last lecture in our summer lecture series. Today we have with us Simi Shenoy and Ebrahim Poustinchi. Simi is lead project manager at Magnopus, an experienced company forging design, art, and technology to create new experiences across AR and VR. The last 5 years of her career were spent leading teams building AR and VR products for Fortune 100 companies in architecture, telecommunications, and entertainment. With a master's in architecture from UCLA's SIGraDi studio, her area of expertise lies at the cross-section of human-centered design and emerging technology. Simi has won multiple academic and design awards, including the Alpha Rho Chi Medal for Leadership, Service and Merit, first place at the ACMA Material Science Design Competition, and honorable mention at MIT's XR Hackathon 2020. She has served as a speaker on numerous panels and conferences, including the Revit Technology Center and the Cannes Film Festival. Simi's background in architecture enables her to cultivate and apply principles of human-centered design to various creative processes, including envisioning, design sprints, prototyping, and testing development. Her passion is to lead cross-functional teams to take innovative ideas from concept to execution by using lean startup methodologies to ideate, iterate, and implement the solution or experience. Having lived and worked in Dubai, Mumbai, New York, and Los Angeles, Simi brings with her a broad understanding of different consumer markets, cultures, and human behavior. And we have Ebrahim Poustinchi, who is an award-winning designer, artist, curator, and inventor, the founder and director of the Robotically Augmented Design Lab, founding principal of the Studio EP, and assistant professor of architecture at Kent State University. Ebrahim completed his post-professional degree in architecture with a focus on robotics and technology under Greg Lynn at UCLA, and he holds a bachelor's degree in architecture from the University of Tehran, Iran. Poustinchi's research is focused on the intersection of design, space, media, and robotics, with an emphasis on an alternative reading of post-digital discourse through UI/UX human-machine interaction and physical computation and tangible interfaces. Ibrahim has widely lectured, taught workshops, and exhibited his work nationally and internationally. His research and creative work have been disseminated worldwide in various journals, conferences, galleries, and museums, including the International Journal of Architectural Computing, Journal of Engineering Technology, the Museum of Moscow, the Meyerhold Theatre Center in Russia, the Arab American National Museum in Michigan, Koniarek Gallery in Slovakia, fully booked art fair in Dubai, the Levantine Cultural Center, the Architecture and Design Museum in Los Angeles, and over 10 different galleries and museums in Iran. He currently serves as the guest curator at the Architecture and Design Museum in Los Angeles and previously taught at the University of Kentucky and at UCLA. And with that, I will hand it over to Simi whenever you're ready.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Charlie. That was a really great intro there. Let me jump in and share my screen real quick. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes, looks good.
Awesome. Alrighty. Well, hello, everyone. My name is Simi. I'm currently lead product manager at Magnopus. My background, like Charlie mentioned, is in architecture. I graduated from the UCLA MArch2 program Singularity Studio with Guvench Ozel in 2016. And it was actually that very program that kind of opened the doors to the world of emerging technology and extended reality. And extended reality, for those of you who are not familiar, is an umbrella term used for augmented reality and virtual reality together. So I did not go the traditional architecture route, although I still utilize a lot of the same principles and frameworks of thinking even today. So spatial design and human-centered design is still a very big part of what I do day to day. So I spent the last 5 years of my career in the AR/VR industry in product, and currently I lead the end-to-end product delivery of a multiplayer cross-platform AR/VR product. By cross-platform, I mean it functions on desktop, mobile, as well as AR and VR headsets. I currently lead a team of 30, so driving everything from ideation sessions to product vision and strategy, to owning the product roadmap and prioritizing feature updates, all the way through to overseeing technical development and release planning. So day to day, I work very closely with developers, engineers, UI, UX designers, UX researchers, prototypers, artists. So multidisciplinary collaboration is really the crux of what my day to day looks like. So I structured this talk as kind of a timeline that captures my journey from UCLA up until present day. And I'd love to begin by sharing with you a little throwback of my master's thesis. I actually recently got selected to speak at the Augmented World Expo conference community about smart spaces. And actually they selected me because they bumped into this project online, funny enough. So it's safe to say that it's aged well. So this is kind of some of my early thinking around sensor-driven smart spaces. And the name of this project is the Kinetic Catalyst. So the kinetic catalyst is an environment that is designed to respond to natural human behavior by enhancing the relationship between a performer and an audience. So this was a pavilion that was designed for the South by Southwest event. And we're doing so through an architectural medium. So the pavilion goes from an enclosed private structure that caters to a lecture environment in the daytime to a dynamic kinetic backdrop powered by a DJ's brainwaves at night. So the pavilion essentially uses sensor-based actuators and EEG data to create this real-time responsive environment. So the pavilion is an extension of the DJ's psyche, and the performative aspects of the kinetic pavilion is in direct response to the DJ's mind waves. So again, this data is drawn from the EEG sensor. It is sent to motors that then actuate the movement of the pavilion. And we also used LED lights that control the ambience there. So we built a physical prototype. We tapped into the 14-channel EEG headset called the Emotive Epoch, and we linked into 3 primary channels. One was focus, the other was engagement, and the other one was stress. And these 3 LED channels or EEG channels linked into these LED lights. So there's essentially this feedback loop that we designed where the performer's emotions are translated into brainwaves, which are then picked up by the EEG sensors that are programmed to kind of alter the pavilion environment in real time. So the audience behavior is responding to the environment, which can then influence the performer's emotions and so on. It's just a feedback loop. So as part of this project, we were tasked with creating a virtual reality version of this project. And so then it came down to this question of, evaluating if people can be on site under this, beautiful architectural structure, what is the value of like recreating it in VR? And so I came down to this question to say, what if people could access these sensor-driven physical spaces remotely to experience, track, or participate in the space in real time from anywhere in the world? So how can input and sensors create media-rich environments that are shared not only across the physical world by way of superimposing digital information, but also in a fully digital world where you can share experiences and insights with other humans from anywhere in the world? And so this was a very pivotal question that I ended up coming back to later in my career, and I will circle back to this later in the presentation. So my first 2 years out of grad school, I worked for an architectural model making company that built scaled down models for companies like SOM, JURDI, HKS, Frank Gehry, to name a few. And I learned a ton about 3D modeling, structural design, fabrication processes, and even got certified as a 3D printing specialist from Stratasys. So in my time at the model shop, we helped 7 architecture firms win bids with our models, which was really exciting. One of the notable projects we helped win a bid for was the Equinox Hotel in downtown LA with Frank Gehry's office. And this was actually back in 2017 when they won the bid. And now they're finally scheduled to complete construction by 2022, which is really exciting to see this project come to life. I literally spent a lot of time with little 3D printed pieces of these angular window designs and setbacks. And, this project was very close to my heart. So I'm excited to finally see it come to life in one-to-one scale. So although this was a very exciting part in my career and it was a very exciting role, I was still very passionate about, AR and VR. And luckily the owner of the company was open and receptive to adopting new technology. So I ended up convincing him that AR VR would be great for the business. And we ended up launching an AR division in the company where we started to build augmented reality activations superimposed on top of these physical architectural models that we were building. So although we captured the interest of our clients and we sold AR products as an add-on service with our models, that was actually my very first experience with building and shipping products from start to finish in AR and VR. So eventually, the business wasn't really set up to scale in the XR industry, and I wanted to pursue it full time. And so I went on to my next stepping stone, my next journey with this company called AfterNow. So AfterNow was an AR VR innovation company where I helped build and launch from the ground up an AR VR, again, cross-platform multiplayer communication and collaboration tool that we like to describe as the PowerPoint of AR and VR. So essentially what you could do is you could upload your own images, text, videos, 3D models, animations, and you could rearrange them in AR VR. The idea here is that anybody who does not know how to use, who's not technically savvy or has never used AR VR before, could create their own presentations in XR. And so we started working very closely with Fortune 500, Fortune 50 companies to create these very elaborate, detailed, beautiful AR VR immersive presentations. And one of our key pivotal moments of accomplishments as part of this was when we helped a C-suite level Fortune 50 company close a $2 billion deal using our product. And that was like an aha moment to say, wow, okay, we built this and it does exactly what it was designed to do. So at the end of the day, you might be thinking, how is this related to architecture? It's still spatial design. It is still content creation. It is still about the human experience and human interaction. And all of those principles were still being used in the creation of this tool. So again, my day-to-day was I was collaborating with UI UX designers. I learned a lot about those principles. I learned about engineering workflows, research and marketing. I had exposure to that for the very first time. And it was a very small team. There was only 12 of us. And so I got to wear multiple hats and it was a fantastic learning experience from there on. And we worked with a ton of clients in architecture and telecommunication and entertainment. And it was a lot of fun. And then all of a sudden, I circled back to this question that I left hanging during my master's thesis. I had a recruiter reach out to me, and the purpose of their company was to start to solve and answer some of what's involved in this question, which is, what if people could access sensor-driven physical spaces remotely to experience, track, or participate in the space in real time from anywhere in the world? Which is what led me to Magnopus. So at Magnopus, we are working on uniting the digital and physical worlds to create unified user experiences that can exist across the reality spectrum. So we have virtual reality, which is fully digital. We have mixed reality and augmented reality, where you're superimposing digital information in your physical environment. And then we have good old reality. And so we're working to enable people to create and consume spaces across this reality spectrum collaboratively. So most of the things we work on at Magnopus tend to be highly confidential, including this product that we're building. So it is with intention that I speak of all this at a very, very high level, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you guys might have at the very end. But just a heads up on that. So we're presently working on large-scale physical sites that have a digital twin, what we're calling a digital twin, and an experience layer that connects occupants to not only the content, but to other users as well. So what we're building at Magnopus isn't just to optimize physical realities via the digital, but also provide operators, decision makers with the tools to be able to do so. So we're looking at content, IoT data, video, audio, all of that kind of unifying within the physical and digital worlds. So we're also taking the social aspects, including like video chat and phone, and creating common spaces across the two. So we're asking questions like, how do we enable people to experience and operate physical spaces remotely? And how are we able to do that collaboratively? And how do we enable people to create and consume spaces across the reality spectrum together? So really starting to bridge a gap that is receptive to human biology, Right now, all of our interfaces are 2D. We have our phones, which are 2D. We have our, desktops that are 2D. But humans and data are incongruous. We've evolved to think spatially, but data tends to be, 2D at the end of the day. So bridging this chasm means bridging the data that is contextual to human biology. So how do we create and consume, in ways that deprecate old ways of working in favor of something that is new, that is 3D, that is immersive, that is collaborative? So there are many different use cases for this technology that we're building out, but for the purpose of this conversation, let's look at the example of smart cities and the value proposition there. Again, there's this concept of a feedback loop with the digital and physical world when looking at how smart cities function, right? So essentially, a smart city it's an urban area that uses different types of maybe electronic systems and sensors to collect data. And that data is translated into insights that are used to optimize and improve the operations across the city. And then the quality of life in these cities will drastically improve. And then these cities are set to become more efficient with better services. And then that leads to a shift in how a city functions, and therefore a shift in the behavior of the people that are in the city. So when there's a shift in the behavior, the data starts to tell a different story. And again, we take that data and we make appropriate decisions from there. So that's kind of like the feedback loop that we're looking at with bridging the digital and physical worlds with smart cities. So that's kind of where we're at Magnopus right now. I've been with the company about 8 months, and we're building this product from the ground up, and it's been an incredible journey so far. So my last slide is, what does this mean for you guys? A little bit of advice that maybe I would have given myself when I was starting out in architecture school is, it's good to stay curious. It's good to experiment, take risks, fail fast, fail early, do quick and dirty things, jump off the deep end, try new things that scare you, get out of your comfort zone. And most importantly, expand your network. Talk to people that are in the industry. I've honestly, the way that I got into all these different roles is through attending networking events and talking to companies that share a same passion and vision as I do. So identifying what you're excited about and find people that are doing well in that space and understand how they got to where they are. I think those are tools that I have used in my career path that I think would be helpful for you guys. So I want to end here with a quote that I love from IDEO. And this is about human-centered design, but I very much think that this applies to architects and architectural designers as well. So designers are unlike other problem solvers. We tinker, we test, we fail early and often. And we spend a surprising amount of time not knowing the answer to the challenge at hand. And yet we forge ahead. We are optimists and makers, experimenters and learners. We empathize and iterate, and we look for inspiration in unexpected places. Thank you guys. That's me.
Fantastic, Simi. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Yulia.
All right, Ibrahim, whenever you are ready.
Awesome, great. So let me try sharing the screen. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Again, hi everyone. Thanks, Simi, for the great presentation, and thanks, UCLA and Yulia for having us, and Charlie for the great introduction. That was awesome. So, I mean, it's funny. I was watching and listening to Simi's presentation. I think we're gonna have a lot of interesting overlaps from time to time in the presentation. So for me, I think the conversation starts from the the dialogue, again, similarly, dialogue between physical space and digital space. And I would like to call them binaries, which I think are false. And I think the dialogue between these two is not necessarily a binary anymore. It seems to be more of a spectrum that ranges from one to another. And we try to look at the similar question, or that question of hybridization, or kind of like blending these two worlds in the work that I do personally at the studio APs, kind of like explorations, or at the RAD Lab, Robotically Augmented Design Lab, with the projects that are ranging from interactive robotics, interaction design, augmented reality and virtual reality setups, ranging from controllers and interfaces for designers, all the way up to the experience design and designing of the kind of tangible, interactive, hybridized physical and architectural spatial experience. So again, our projects ranges from interactive sculptures to completely digital experiences, from robotic videography to human-machine interaction, and all the way up to kind of like interactive full scale environment. So this is a really short demo of some of the projects that we have done, including some of the ones that I did at UCLA under Reglin and Yulia's professorship and mentorship. And I think with that, I would like to capture attention to look at some of the false binaries that we already deal with. And I mean, there are many of them. And as I said, I like them as a conversation opener, but I think they're not as binary as we often assume they are. And for today, I'm going to talk specifically about the binary, the false binary that exists between digital and physical, and how we at RAD Lab and in my personal practice, we try to address some of these questions experimentally and try to come up with a kind of new reading or new kind of alternative of these. But before that, we should know a little bit more about kind of like what this perspective is coming from. So I'm a formalist, and I think that's not a hidden secret. You can easily find that with some of the projects we do, or I did for museums, or the projects, speculative houses, or digitally fabricated projects, all the way to the work that leads more towards the product design or kind of the studio work that my students are producing. So it's really kind of safe to say that's one of the very few labels that I proudly wear, that the fact that I'm a formalist, and I think that lens or that perspective is really what comes first in many of the conversations that we deal with at RAD Lab or in my studio. And it's kind of good to mention that I mean it, and not necessarily formalism in a way that lives or exists in architecture as a kind of against or opposed to functionalism, but rather I look at it more from the Russian formalism conversation, where it defines the existence. In another word, everything needs to have form to be or to be present. Even the work that we do in the master thesis, I think it has to do with the dialogue between forms, or even the speculative advertising projects that we do at RAD Lab, all the way to some kind of storytelling projects, which I'm going to talk a little bit more about as we move forward. So I think I just wanted to mention that up front, just so we know this is just one perspective, and it's just one of the very specific ones that deals with form, deals with binaries between digital and physical, and tries to seek a solution. And one more piece of information before we wrap up the introduction. I think we need to know the statement behind some of these projects. And this is just a very short one. The fact that I'm a formalist interested in basically digitalizing the physical and physicalizing the digital. And most importantly, I deal with architecture as a UX medium, as a medium for experience, and also as a medium for kind of interaction similar to interface design. So technically, for me, architecture is a medium that is extension of softwares and is a platform or a medium for experiencing. And then we use tangible mediums or tangible technologies as intellectual vehicle to address some of this. So with that, I'm going to talk about 4 projects plus one personal project at the end. And the first group of projects, and I'm going to go through them quickly just so we can talk more in detail about the last 2 ones, are the ones that we specifically deal with the interface design. So no keyboard, no mouse is one of those part of the seminar that I taught at University of Kentucky, where students design their own basically keyboard and mouse, if you will, as a way to control the design environment, in this case, Rhino environment. So in another word, it's kind of like a pre-programmed hardware that everyone can use, as including the kind of users without design background, to design something that is quote unquote legit and kind of like proper for 3D printing in this case. So that kind of grows onto our project, kind of the patent that I filed 2 years ago, which you can find more details of it on Google patent, is almost the same thing. It's basically an interface or a hardware that kind of like joins a robotic controller and basically enables everyone with or without design background to program the robot in real time with any platform that they want to. Basically, in this case, in this example, the platform or the interface is the phone that is connecting to that PX1 controller and then controls the robot for any architectural purposes or creative purposes. The same thing with kind of custom interfaces, in this case, Grasshopper, or so on and so forth. And again, another recent one, O1, which we designed a custom-made augmented reality interface or controller that kind of tries to, that might be a big word, but tries to democratize the access to augmented reality, or in this case, augmented, in another project, virtual reality, for everyone without necessarily needing advanced kind of software or hardware. In this case, it's just a cell phone and a custom app, and basically a hardware that we custom made and 3D printed at home, meaning at a rad lab. And then one of my students, Mona, in this case, she's designing an environment or a composition using this custom-made controller. So that's almost more or less the first chunk or group of projects that we are busy with and doing, which deals with controllers and interfaces. The second category is the work that we do related to animation. And that, of course, ranges from, this is actually recent work from the graduate studio that I taught at Kent State. It ranges from like, kind of, I would like to mention it as like traditional animation work that deals with digital animations and deals with kind of imaging and kind of rendering, so on and so forth, in a digital environment or in a software like Maya or other animation softwares. That deals, of course, with representation and storytelling and, you know, kind of narration and all of that. But we try to kind of move a little bit farther away from just digital animation in our work. And we started to kind of develop our own tools, in this case, kind of a custom-made plugin for Grasshopper to enable us with animating the robot in a way that we usually animate things in other softwares like Maya, as a way to kind of negotiate with the physical and digital environment through possible mediums or possible opportunities to cross these two. For example, in this case, using the animation software we developed, we are controlling the robot to see through the augmented reality environment as if we are kind of moving or hovering in that environment. Or kind of similar to that, the work that I'm gonna show and talk about a little bit further, which kind of moves beyond that and kind of deals with telepresence. But before we go there, speaking of animation, I would like to talk about this project as well, which is trying to bring those animation qualities that you see in animation softwares and in digital environments mostly into a physical environment through animated kind of a sculpture or modeling interface. So in this case, Robobble was an installation that we did in 2015, which deals with, of course, animation and modeling using cell phone, basically. So the idea is that through controlling platforms that we developed for cell phone, audience or the users can start not only manipulating the form or creating their own kind of composition out of the Robobble kind of platform, but also they can start collaborating on the same project. So in another word, it's an ongoing, ever-growing kind of object or digitally fabricated object that is not having only one presence or one iteration of itself, but rather it becomes this dynamic, alive element that always changing, and that kind of is based on the desire or the interaction that the audience are kind of superimposing over that. And the project really started to tap into the kind of ideas of bridging the physical and digital a little bit stronger for me, which then initiated the third category of projects, which I'm going to talk a little bit more in detail about, which are dealing with combining or hybridizing the robotics technology with augmented reality technology. The project in this case started from a very basic, simple kind of a scenario or dialogue between digital environment and the physical environment, where you can narrate a story or create an architectural space or just purely in a space that is hybridized with digital content and physical performance of the robot. So the technology of it is super simple, basically. I mean, as soon as the camera sees the image, in this case, this image, it starts to impose or kind of overlay digital content over that. And we use this technology, which is now actually outdated almost after a couple of years, to narrate a story composed with digital technology of augmented reality and the physical performance of robotics. So the story became, or the project became, a storytelling scene for narrating a story of a robot, of a future child, let's say, or a future pet that plays in this hybrid kind of like content or stage of mixed reality. And then the idea is the audience or the user can engage with this environment through not only physical interactions and sound and the performance of the robot, but also through the kind of the digital animations that the robot is interacting with. So everything is happening in real time, the dialogue between the physical robot and the virtual reality, the augmented reality content. And of course, the narration or the perspective can happen through the choice of the user. And this project led into one of the recent projects at Rad Lab that we did at ACADIA conference. We were invited to do a workshop on augmented reality and robotics. And we used the similar concept of hybridization of digital and physical and robotics and augmented reality to create quote unquote telepresence through robotics. So the idea is just breaking down the concept of presence into two smaller, more tangible ideas, which is motion and modification. So through breakage of presence into concept of motion and modification, we looked into the possibilities of using the ideas of moving through the lens of the robot in a space and the idea of augmented reality as a way to modify the physical content both at the same time to create a telepresence platform. So for that, of course, we needed a digital model of our physical lab, which we made. And then from there, it was really a combination of these two that proposed or created this dialogue between physicality and digitality. Throughout the workshop, we had participants from all across the globe, from China, from Norway, from Seattle, from San Francisco, and everywhere, that they could join us through the custom-made software we had for kind of online robotic controls. And then by moving the camera, which was mounted on the robot, they could kind of walk around in the space and physically kind of like move around and kind of control the robot as if they are walking in the space. And then by using augmented reality technology through Unity, the game engine, and custom-made apps, they could add or remove things from the Rad Lab. At the time, I think it was close to Halloween, so everyone started to decorate our lab using, I mean, you're gonna see some of them using pumpkins and skeletons and things like that, or zombies. And in another word, they started to kind of resemble the presence as if they were there through, again, overlaying augmented content into the lab, and most importantly, trying to move around freely. So again, the idea of hybridizing these two as a way to create a version of presence was quite interesting, and was really, I think, one of our favorite projects up until now at Rad Lab. And of course, just so we can feel that our audience or our participants are present too, we were kind of mounting a monitor on the robot just so we could see the face of whoever was running the robot. So it was a really kind of, now that I look back, it was a really crazy setup in terms of the number of elements that they were running at the same time in real time, and as a multiplayer platform that everyone could kind of control the robot in order. But at the same time, I think it's quite simple in terms of the concepts of it. that is really looking at the idea of virtualization of presence and kind of, in a way, hybridizing or physicalizing the digital qualities of telepresence into a physical world. So if you're interested in this project, there are much more information about this on my website. But just the idea, just so we can lay out the ground of what we do at RadLab, it's really one of our projects that really is successful in terms of combining these two or in this case 3 platforms at the same time, just so it creates one cohesive, continuous experience of a hybrid platform. As you can see, there are moments that the person that is controlling the robot can see exactly what the room would be through their augmented reality lens. And there are moments that everyone else can see what the person that controls the robot can see. And also there is a moment, this I call quote unquote God view, that everyone sees everything that goes on in a backstage sense. So this was the setup actually in the backstage where everything was happening at the same time. And as you can see, the robot is performing separately, and kind of like different monitors or different screens and cameras are capturing different content, and different platforms are controlling different components of this multi-component platform. And with that, which was mainly physicalization of digital content through overlaying them into a physical space, we kind of get to this recent project or recent exhibition that I curated for A+D Museum in Los Angeles, which I was invited to do like early 2020, and I wanted some more time to think about it. And we come up with this idea of one object at a time exhibition, which technically is questioning the idea of exhibition at large. So different from the previous projects that we discussed, that was physicalizing the digital environment. This one is kind of, sorry, the digitalizing of the physical environment. This one is kind of looking back at potentials of kind of augmented reality and virtual reality as a way to resemble the physical experience. So the whole experience is defined or divided into 2 web-based and PC VR experience, where in the VR experience, the whole concept of exhibition is tried to be questioned in a way that the exhibition space is not anymore a platform or kind of a setup that we display objects. Rather, it becomes a platform or an environment that is made with objects. So instead of kind of this hierarchical relationship between the object, artifact, and the space, and exhibited and exhibition, and things like that, we started to question the possibilities of an exhibition that is made with what is exhibited. So think about it, or imagine as if this is a familiar kind of museum, like for example Louvre, and then you have the opportunity to not only touch the objects, or not only to feel the artifacts, but also to experience them spatially, or to kind of inhabit them or inhale the kind of the possibilities of being around them. So it was a virtual reality platform, multiplayer, a real-time platform that this is a footage from the VR experience, that everyone, including the audience, could start joining the design process of the work or of the exhibition at large. So we had multiple basically controllers across the platform, where we could kind of choose what object you want to be at the moment there. And that way the audience or the users of the exhibition could start shifting or changing the look of the exhibition by their choices, or by their kind of decisions of how to move the space, how to move objects around, how to put them in different positions. And then I move a little bit further just for the sake of time. The audience are free to add or remove elements to the exhibition with some curatorial kind of agency. Again, it's trying to flatten the relationship between the curator, designer, main designers who are like architects and artists who contributed the objects. But at the same time, it gives some agencies to the audience or to the user that comes and visits, or visitors, to interact with the environment on a level that is not usually as interactive at the museum level. So it's not only breaking the hierarchy in terms of the space and relationship of it to the object, but also in terms of the, again, it's a big word. I don't want to use democratization that often, but it is really, in a way, trying to flatten that hierarchy or relationship between kind of users and the designers. And one last element that I would like to share from this is there are other controllers in the exhibition, and I highly recommend, if you have time, to check out the exhibition. It still is alive on digitalaplus.org. There are different other controllers that enables the audience or users to create their own objects, or in another word, create their own worlds using the objects that our designers contributed to the show. And of course, you know, I mean, there are other footages from the PC game experience that was going on. And again, feel free to check out the exhibition. I'm gonna pass these for the sake of time, just so we get to the last component of this exhibition. And to make it even more accessible for the audience, One Object at a Time also lives as a web-based experience, where it serves as the museum shop, if you will, where you can technically design your own postcards with your favorite artists and designers kind of object. So it's a web-based experience. It's kind of accessible through any kind of browser, preferably not phones, but I mean, it works on phones too. And technically, the idea is that the using maybe I go with some of the objects that we know better. You can really draw with these objects as if they are 3D brushes, and technically by clicking on the logo of the exhibition, you will have a kind of a saved version of the postcard that you made in technically quote unquote collaboration with your favorite artist. So again, trying to break this kind of hierarchical relationship in a managed way, where of course the originality of the object or originality of the artwork is still there, but at the same time it tries to kind of blur these boundaries between the user and the artist in a way that it's not as broken or as kind of hierarchically divided in a way. So again, creating card postals or postal cards, in this case with Ferdo Colatan's and Sue Levin's work, and many others, many of my favorite, my personal favorite designers too. So feel free to check it out. And I have just some quick demos of some of the, you know, drawing processes, and you can at any time press a screenshot to capture this screenshot. And with some of these demos, I think I'm probably gonna wrap up the conversation. But again, just to wrap it up as the time is passing, I think the bigger concept that I was trying to kind of talk about today, and I'm gonna kind of bypass this last project, is really that this was a very specific perspective from one kind of vision about this, which I'm pretty sure there are multiple different ones about that, which comes from a formalist who is interested in digitalizing the physical and physicalizing the digital, and uses architecture not only as building or as a platform for pure kind of space making, but also as a medium for experience, and also as a platform that is extended of software and interface. So with that, I think for today, we were mostly talking about digitalization of physical and physicalizing the digital. And I'm looking forward to the Q&A part of the lecture today. Thank you, everyone.
Great. Thank you so much for both of your wonderful presentations. We do have a few questions in the Q&A already. We have one from Kyung, who's one of our Jumpstart program instructors. It sort of ties into a question that I also have for the both of you. She's saying, hi, Simi, this is Kyung from Jumpstart. She is a practicing architect who graduated from UCLA. Simi, from your experience, what do you say are the different uses of reality, mixed reality, and virtual reality in the architectural field? Would it be audience-based, like to show your clients your project design, versus a user's spatial experience? And then just to add on a little bit to that question, one that I have for both of you is that I noticed that while you both use similar technology, your works are very different. Ibrahim, your work is very research-based and academic, and Simi, yours is focused on the commercial world. And like Kyung's question, do you think that the academic and professional applications of the VR and AR technologies differ?
Those are some really great questions. Yeah, so I think, you know, AR and VR technology can really provide architects with the ability to like digitally interact with their projects past the computer screen. And I think that's kind of the beauty of it, right? Whether it's AR, where, you know, it is part of a communication and collaboration tool where you're having a conversation about your project at scale with others, where, you know, it's a scaled down version of your project, of your design, or whether you're taking the user and putting them directly into your project at a one-to-one scale. And that's a very different experience as well, right? So that's like kind of the difference between AR and VR. And now we're seeing a lot of actually companies and startups coming up that are focused on augmented reality for construction, for example, where now they're superimposing like, you know, structural, designs on top of like physical environments to make decisions on site in real time. I think that's also a very prominent use case that we're seeing these days. But like virtual walkthroughs as well. Like we're seeing a lot of these companies, you know, people like SOM, like Gensler, like ACOM, a lot of these guys have VR departments internally that specialize in walkthroughs, where you're able to take your client for the first time with this technology and like give them the end-to-end experience of actually being on site. So I think there are a number of experiences and use cases for architecture and construction. I hope that answers your question. And I'll pass it over to Ibrahim to answer the second.
Sure, thanks. Yeah, I agree. This is an awesome question. Yeah, I think for me, it seems to be similar to, can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Oh, awesome. Okay, perfect. So yeah, for me, I think it's more of a conversation which is similar to the beginning of digital or digital architecture in early 90s. That, okay, like at the beginning, you would like to duplicate what you've been doing in a more efficient or more kind of effective way, let's say, which I think it's more or less the same approach we are taking towards technology, like robotics, augmented reality, XR at large, which is, of course, you know, like representational. It's about the experience and kind of simulation of experience and things like that, which is, I mean, absolutely fascinating. And I think for me, maybe the difference is that I'm trying to find the possibility, or just like collectively ask this question, what would be the next, or how these can change not only the way we design, but also the way that we experience the world, or the way we experience the, I mean, even the built work, right? The space, because as I said, I believe architecture is the practice of making experience and space. So I think for me, maybe the difference of the projects that you're mentioning also comes from this attempt, which is a really high risk attempt, because there's no kind of guarantee about any of the results. But it tries to ask these questions of how it may change the whole idea of experiencing a kind of a setup or a physical setup. Would it be possible to make it not only, I mean, it's basically A and B and possibility of C. I think for me, I'm trying to look into the possibilities of, would these two together, is it possible that they produce a C possibly, or we have to kind of like look at it as a representation of either within the other. So I think we're seeking the C at this point. That's the plan for Rad Lab.
I like that a lot, Ibrahim, because like now there's this whole topic of like the metaverse and like the digital twin. And like, I think in ways that does become our C, because we're taking our reality and we're replicating reality in a separate world, using these technologies. So I love that C option as well.
Let's find the C together then.
I know. Yeah, I love that there's so much overlap also between some of our work and thinking, although like the disciplines are very, very different. I actually have a question for you. You mentioned physicalizing the digital, and that kind of sparked for me, you know, virtual presence is a big like question mark. It's a gap. We haven't really fully achieved it, but I'm curious to know more in your research. How have you defined virtual presence, and to what extent were you able to achieve it?
I think that's it. That's the $1 million question. I think But this is awesome. Great question. So for us, I think it's less of necessary. So of course, in art or the ACADIA workshop, it was about presence, quote unquote. But I think for me, it's more about virtual or digital qualities. And I think that's where, I mean, I had a conversation with Jill Retzin the other kind of couple of months ago. We were talking about his work and my work. And I think that that's the difference that I would categorize like his way of approaching digital as a system that he then physicalizes with the discrete units and blocks and everything, versus some of the work we try to do, which is the physicalizing the digital qualities. So I think for me, it's really the experiential aspects of it, right? So again, animating things or kind of like overlaying or kind of almost, I think it's the difference between a speculative realism or magical realism. So I think I'm more interested in magical realism, where it's everything is kind of like familiar, but there is something that is not familiar, right? So I think it's really that poking in with digital qualities into physical daily base, and the other way around, right? So like digital environment that you're supposed to experience it physically, experience it freely, but then you have or we bring some restrictions from physical environment. So I think it's more about hybridizing the experience or kind of the storytelling of those. I think it's more leaning towards that, because you're right, the presence is not an easy topic to tap in. So it's more on the storytelling side at this point.
That definitely makes sense. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you both. So we have two questions from two of our Jumpstart students, Millie and Ben. They're a little similar. Millie is asking to further expand on the first question that we had about the uses of VR and AR. How do you move forward with the VR AR experience by utilizing it as a tool for construction? She says she's wondering what advances could be made if you could use projection to display building plans directly on site. And from Ben, a question for either of you. Outside of the client-firm relationship, do you see VR and AR technologies being implemented as actual architectural features through projections and screens? And do you think architecture has a place within NFTs and similar virtual art mediums? Sorry, a lot of questions I know, but I wanted to make sure they get answered.
Yeah, I can go ahead and address the first one. I'm wondering what advances we could make if we could use projection to display building plans directly on the site. Yeah, I think that AR kind of allows you to do that in certain scales and components. I mean, the technology isn't there fully yet, right? Like we're limited to our field of view. And so we're not able to like zoom in and out and see entire floor plans at a time, which is why in the construction field, it's being used in certain like areas at a time, right? Where you can kind of align a building with all of its structure and then use that digital alignment to build the physical building on top of it. So I think the example that you're giving there to build plans directly on site, that's exactly it. I think that's a very similar use case to what's being done in the industry right now. And then for Ben, real quick, through projections and screens, do you think architecture has a place within NFTs? Ooh, I want to pass this one to Ibrahim. Like this is your world somehow.
But just one quick suggestion, because I totally agree with you, Simi, about the first question. So if for Miley, if you're interested, I think one of the cool projects you can check out is from Sumin Ham and the steampunk pavilion they did, because I think it's not only about for the construction, it's not only about duplication or kind of the precision, but it gives some opportunities for improvisation at the same time, which is odd, because I mean you're dealing with precision, but at the same time this kind of like bridging sometimes kind of eases a little bit on the stress of precision in a way, in a highly precise way. So it's kind of real. I mean, you should check it out. But about the NFTs and experiences, I think, I mean, I'm not even sure what NFT is at this point, right? So because it's a really recent new thing or the concept, but I feel it's very normal, and I mean that's what we should have expected anyways when we are producing media arts and digital arts for years. I mean, it's very kind of logical and rational that we collect them digitally as well. So I think your second question kind of lives within your first question, that as if because I mean, we can talk about architectural representation that we collect as NFTs, and some of actually my friends Gallo and Gallo Canizares, Stephanie, they're already producing representational NFT works that you can collect. But I think your real question is kind of within your first question, that can we even think about architecture or architectural space as a digital or kind of virtualized or hybridized material or element, which then we can technically buy and sell it through a digitality or through its digital presence. And I think that's a question we all try to find out one way or the other, whether it's a yes or no. I think that's why I'm interested. That's what I'm interested in, to just ask that question and see how much we can push it and how much of it would be dependent to kind of technological gadgets, right? So how much of it can become native to the physical space, how much of it would be kind of limited to our gadgets and tools. Because if you think about it, we already have these technologies embedded into our daily base lives through Snapchat, Instagram, all of these that are dealing with filters and overlays, right? So I mean, I think it's more of the question of that tool that sits in between and bridges these two. That kind of in between is the key. But great question. Let me know if you find the answer.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I'm so glad we're getting such good questions today. It is 1:59, so I think we might cut it here. But thank you so much, Simi and Ibrahim, for your time today. Thank you for your wonderful presentations. I really enjoyed them. I'm sure everyone else did as well. Thank you to all of our students and instructors who joined today. Hope you all enjoyed these presentations as much as I did. I hope to meet both of you sometime in the near future.
Awesome. Thank you. And yeah, likewise. Thanks for having us. It was a pleasure.
Thank you, Ibrahim and Simi.
Thank you so much, Julia, for the invite. This was awesome.
And for
thanks to the students. Thanks for the students to join in, and to the instructors.
Yes. Also, I'm happy to share my contact if anyone has any questions or wants to reach out at the end of this, and I'll drop it in the chat here. That's my personal email. Feel free to reach out.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great idea. I don't want to kill time, but feel free. Everything is on my website too. But I would be more than happy to continue the conversation offline or in another online scenario. Thanks, everyone.